What if the person who was supposed to protect you turned out to be the one thing you actually needed protection from? Julia Anderson wasn't asking herself that question on a Monday night in July. She was just finishing a shift. The same shift she'd worked for almost 17 years, and walking to her Jeep. Black, with pink trim. The kind of detail you'd only know if you actually knew her. She was 39, 1 month from turning 40. Within minutes, none of that would matter. And when detectives finally made an arrest, they didn't have to look for a stranger in the shadows. The man they charged was the same man Julia had shared a house with her entire adult life, her uncle. To understand why this case has stuck with so many people, you have to understand who Julia Anderson actually was. She spent almost 2 decades working as an aide at a group home in the Bronx, caring for adults with developmental disabilities. The people who knew her used the same words over and over: sharp, warm, dedicated. At one point, her employer tried to promote her out of that frontline role. She said no. The hands-on work meant more to her than any title could. She lived in Mount Vernon, in a 2-family home passed down through generations of her family, a home she shared with her 58-year-old uncle, Michael Foster. Police say the call came in just before midnight, a report of an assault near Murdoch and Nereid Avenues in the Bronx. Officers arrived to find Julia inside her Jeep, shot. She was rushed to Jacobi Hospital, where she was pronounced dead a short time later. In the first hours, the story investigators were chasing felt almost cinematic, and not in a good way. Witnesses described a man on a moped pulling up beside her car and firing through the passenger window before vanishing into traffic. For a city that's seen more than its share of senseless violence, this read, at first, like exactly that. Random. A stranger with a gun. It didn't stay that way for long. The next night, Tuesday, NIPTA detectives sat down with Michael Foster inside the very home he'd shared with Julia. According to sources close to the investigation, something in that conversation didn't add up. Statements that pointed the case directly back at him. By Wednesday evening, Foster was in custody, charged with murder, manslaughter, and 10 counts of criminal possession of a weapon. I want to pause on something here, because it matters. A charge is not a conviction. Michael Foster has not been found guilty of anything in a court of law, and legally, he's entitled to the same presumption of innocence as anyone else. What we can tell you is what actually happened in court. On Thursday, a judge remanded him. No bail. He's sitting in jail right now, waiting for this to play out. Before we get into what's arguably the most unsettling part of this story, if you prefer true crime that waits for the truth instead of guessing at it, hit subscribe. It helps more than you'd think, and it means you won't miss what we dig into next. Here's the part of this story that even reporters who cover crime for a living didn't see coming. This wasn't the first time Julia and her uncle had ended up on opposite sides of something serious. About a year before she died, Foster accused her of forging the deed to that same shared home. She was actually arrested over it. But the charges fell apart almost immediately. Julia didn't just move on. She fought back. Legally, in a lawsuit. And in that filing, she described the case against her as built on the word of a convicted felon with a documented history of violence, and what she called a personal vendetta. She was talking about her own uncle. On the record, more than a year before he allegedly killed her, and that history she referenced wasn't vague. Back in 1988, Michael Foster was convicted of fatally shooting a man named Calvin Reed in that same city of Mount Vernon. Reed's son would go on to become an NFL running back, Ray Rice. I keep circling back to this. A woman, in writing, formally warning that the man she lived with had already killed once. And more than a year later, according to police, he allegedly did it again. Right now, this case is still moving through the courts. Michael Foster is being held without bail, and it will likely be months before anyone knows exactly how this resolves. What we do know is this. A woman who spent her career caring for people who couldn't always care for themselves is gone. Weeks before a birthday she should have gotten to celebrate. The people who knew her say she made everyone around her feel a little safer. It's a brutal irony that safety was the one thing she couldn't find in her own home. We'll keep following this case as it moves through the courts, and we'll bring you real updates the moment there's real news, not speculation.